We are less than 2 weeks away from the 2024 general election. I am nervous.
The heart palpitations have begun.
I have night sweats and night terrors, and I cry frequently. Okay, this is not healthy for anybody. It's
night
not
sweats
good.
plus day sweats. Why stop?
Why stop?
Yeah.
But this video, okay, the 2024 general election has a lot of stuff to talk about with it. Okay, but I'm only going to focus today on Pennsylvania. I want to focus in on the early vote coming out of Pennsylvania. We made a video about this a week ago. And again, I want to emphasize Pennsylvania is where this election is basically going to be won or lost.
Yeah.
Whoever wins Pennsylvania is very, very likely to win the entire thing. If you go into like Nate Silver's models, if you give Pennsylvania to Kamala Harris, she wins 95% of the simulations. If you give Pennsylvania to Trump, he wins like 99% of the simulations.
Yeah, the Democrats certainly like pretty much need Pennsylvania.
This is basically a need for Kamala Harris. So I want to go into the early vote here. Okay, so in all, 1.1 million people have already voted in Pennsylvania. That's about a third of the whole electorate.
That's
going to
wild.
come out of the state. A third, like a quarter. It's around there. In Allegheny County, there have been 142,000 ballots that have been returned. Back in the 2020 election, there were about 700,000 people who voted in Allegheny County. So it's about 1/7, 1/6 of the people who are going to vote in Allegheny have already voted. What are the results? Well, because Pennsylvania has party ID registration, we can see the parties of the people who returned their ballots. And 71% of people who returned their ballots are Democrats. 20% of people who returned their ballots are Republicans. Now, the reason I want to talk about this is Democrats are going to start the night with an early lead in Pennsylvania. Okay, Allegheny County is going to report their mail-in votes by about 8 p.m. Eastern time, and then we're going to know basically the results of all these votes that I'm talking about, these 142,000. Now, once that happens, it's going to be of how much the Democrats can hold back Republican gains throughout the rest of the early voting period and the election day vote. When Donald Trump lost in Pennsylvania in 2020, he got around 40% of the vote of Allegheny. Biden got 60%.
Okay.
So the goal of Kamala Harris is to get to that 60% number. When John Fetterman won the 2022 Senate race, he won Allegheny with 63% of the vote. Now that is going to be the deciding factor of how Kamala Harris is going to do in the Pittsburgh suburbs and all the rest. Now, what I get nervous about here is what you were basically talking about before we hopped on here. A lot of the people who are returning these ballots are older.
Yes.
And because they're older, all right, they're high propensity voters most of the time, but because they're older, now these campaigns who are, sorry, I fucked up again. What did I just say?
High propensity voters most of the time.
Yes.
Since they're older, these campaigns.
Yeah, I don't want to say that. I wanted to say banked, older. Okay. Since these people are older, they're more likely to be Republican. And this gives the Republicans a little bit of an advantage, I think, because now they don't have to go knocking on these doors anymore.
Do we know whether it's a difference, though, from early voting in 2022 or 2020, the share of early voters that are older voters?
Yes. I mean, like 2020 and 2022 was just so difficult because 2020 was COVID. 2022 wasn't a presidential election.
Yeah.
We don't really have precedent for a lot of this. We're learning as we're analyzing.
Yeah.
Right? We're trying to find trends, and when there's nothing to even compare it to, we're just trying to see what's happening.
Sure.
You know, which makes it difficult to do a larger analysis. But what I think is notable is if a lot of elderly people have already voted, okay, Republicans, who elderly voters are their base, don't have to put in the get out the vote effort of getting those people out.
Okay.
While Democrats now have to spend a lot of money in these next 2 weeks to make sure that their younger voters, their voters of color, are getting to the polls.
I don't know how much that resonates with me, though, because I mean, at least every narrative that you're reading right now is still that Republicans are fighting just as hard for like younger men, right? Hispanics, black voters. They're fighting for them hard, even though they expect the Democrats to have a lead with those demographics.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not with younger men. They still think that there are significant gains that could be made if they could turn out more of them.
That's true. That's actually true. And we can see that, I mean, whatever the polling tells you nowadays, but we know that low propensity voters are more likely to be Trump supporters now. right? The low propensity voters used to be Democrats, but that's not the case. Now a low propensity voter, someone who doesn't vote very frequently, they're more likely to be Republican now. So with the Allegheny vote coming out at 8 p.m., I want you to look at the margin that we get right away. In 2022, when John Fetterman won the Senate race, once the Allegheny vote dropped, he was leading by about 84% with 27% of the vote in. That is the number that I'm going to look for.
He was leading by 84,
No,
or he had 84?
He had 84. Sorry.
Okay.
He had 84 with 27% of the vote in. That's what I'm going to be watching for at 8 p.m. on election night. I'm going to look for that number.
So I'm curious, maybe it's not even worth trying to compare the Fetterman campaign to the Harris campaign. But Fetterman only won by a few percent.
He won by 5, which is pretty big for Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I thought he only won by a few tenths of a percent.
No. He won by 5.
Okay, so
That's
so 84 probably isn't actually the bar.
That's probably
84
that's not what she needs.
No, 84 makes you comfortable, but
Yes.
84 isn't necessary.
Exactly. What she needs is at the end of the day to hit Joe Biden's number of 60% in Pittsburgh. The Democrats statewide have made significant progress, and this is where I'll end this segment. So the firewall number that Joshua Smithley on Twitter, he's like one of the Pennsylvania, orb seers, okay? He knows
Oracles.
Pennsylvania oracles. He knows Pennsylvania better than anybody else in the business. He thinks that a Democratic firewall needs to be about 400,000 votes. 400,000 votes more than Republican votes. It banked into this early vote here. Currently, Democrats are at 355,000.
Yes.
We're getting close. There's 13, 12 days left as we're recording this.
Yep.
We're getting very, very close. And if Democrats are able to get over that 400,000 number, it's more likely that Democrats win than not. I'm not saying that if Democrats bank over 400,000 that they're definitely going to win. That's not what that means, but it means they have a greater than 50% odds of pulling it off.